Hello, hidden gems. Look, John and I are matching completely on purpose. Just
Yeah.
not on purpose, but it did make me smile when I saw that we were matching. Because I miss
Yeah, I
her.
had no idea what you were wearing. So
I was texting him, be there or be square. And by the way, wear blue.
yeah, just luck of the draw, I guess. First day of defense, we had to match.
Yeah. With Chad, I guess. So maybe we shouldn't think about matching because Chad is always in his blue. So his light blue. What a day. What a day. So John was watching along with everyone. We were not watching together, clearly, because I was in the courtroom during the first day of defense for the Chad Daybell trial. Heather, thank you so much. And oh my goodness, I was texting John right after they called Emma. I was like, Emma's starting. And you were great. You were texting me and you said, I'm watching. And I said, we've got to go live right after this. And you said, I'm in. And so here we are. I rushed back to do this live, but John and I have not talked. We have not exchanged notes, and he has not even watched my lunch live, so he doesn't know what I was fuming about. No clue.
Yep, no, I haven't. So yeah, I don't know what you talked about, but since we're kind of short on time, let's get right to it.
Let's get to it.
Unless you have some other stuff. Okay.
Let's talk Emma Daybell. Like I said, they know my thoughts on Emma. I shared at the lunch live. I'll chime in, but what were your thoughts?
Well, before we talk about Emma Daybell, I was kind of miffed when, Pryor's doing his job, right? Like I respect the fact that he's doing his job and he's supposed to do what he's doing. He's supposed to throw a wrench into the prosecution's case. So, but he's always a bit of an irritant, like putting out everything else aside, it's like irritating watching him and just, and so, at first I was just sort of, kind of put off, and I felt like he was doing really well. And, there were some things that he was kind of poking holes in that kind of bothered me.
But are you talking about today or all over?
Today.
Okay, today.
But then I stepped back a little bit from it, and I thought, whenever a defense case is based primarily, and I know his isn't, but when the main witnesses in a defense case are family members, you're probably not going to have a very strong defense. So coming out of the blocks with 3 family members is problematic, because any jury will know that family members, especially children, are going to be biased. And in fact, they were biased. So I think it's important to keep in mind that as much as like it's irritating to see kind of this alternative reality being presented, that the jury's going to be well aware of the fact, and I hope the prosecution reiterates this point, that these are family members and they're biased family members. And that was probably the most important thing about Emma's testimony, was the fact that she essentially said, I basically believe what my father believes. Correct. Right. And we know his father's beliefs led to murder. So if you believe that, then you're probably going to agree with your father on everything. Yeah. So I think her credibility to me was somewhat questionable when she started talking about, dark and light. And in fact, I wrote it down here. She talked about being possessed by a dark entity.
Right. Someone said, yeah, she talks to her dad every day, but isn't biased.
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, that exactly that. And I mean, and Lindsay Blake tripped her up when she asked about, did your dad ever advise you on what to say? And she said never, basically. And, I think so. I'm sure they must. I'm guessing, I could be wrong. I'm guessing that they have some jailhouse recordings
Oh
where
yeah.
Chad is kind of telling her what to say. I don't know. We'll have to see. But even Lindsay Blake was kind of taken aback. She's like, what? Your dad? Your dad has never advised you on anything related to this trial? I mean, it's not believable.
She brought out specific things too. Like, your dad didn't tell you to talk about the Fitbit shaking? Nope. But you would watch your mom as she was in bed? No. But you saw her doing it? Yes. But you don't live there? And you told your dad on the phone? And he told you? But this is from you? I know. Anyway, sorry, what were your notes? I'm so curious what your notes are.
Well, let's start with, well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to you before we go too far in terms of, you got mentioned again by Pryor. So so apparently you're shaking things up in Idaho because Pryor keeps talking about you. He talked about you with the podcast people, and now he said, quote, I got a lot of heat. This is a direct quote from Pryor, which I attribute to you. He didn't say your name, but quote, I got a lot of heat for suggesting about people's weight and size. That was the day you came on your lunch live and talked about body shaming, because he was implying that Tammy was obviously overweight, and that, I guess,
and that she was lazy, and that she was, yeah,
right. And so that may have contributed to her demise, apparently, her quick demise, by the way, with,
right.
Bruises all over her body. Yeah, having bruises on your arms, that's completely natural. So, right. So,
well, I can't, right. And it wasn't just that. I want to say it wasn't just mentioning weight. Nothing wrong with weight. We all fluctuate. It was that he said, was she petite? Everyone was discussing how fit she was. And it was, but is she petite? She's not petite. First off, that's objective. Secondly, because she's not petite, we're now referring to objectifying somebody. We're sizing up, not even whether they're overweight or not. We're just sizing up their figure. And then essentially comparing her to Lori, I suggest, and then implying that she deserved to die because she wasn't petite.
No, right. No, well, not deserved, that she did.
And that she did.
Her weight played some factor in her unexpected death, right? So
yeah. And I pointed out that, John Pryor has a little bit of extra weight on him. No judgment, but he's still alive. So, what's the difference?
So anyway, I got to chuckle over the fact that you came up again, and I mean, he didn't say your name, but we know who he's talking about. So when he's taking a jab at you, and in front of an international audience, I guess you've gotten under his skin. So good job there.
Thank you. See what I did there?
Let's talk a little bit about her nonverbals. She's very monotone. Not unexpectedly, like her father, she has very little affect. So I think, however, so during Pryor's direct with her, she kind of came off as being, a little bland, monotone, probably very little emotion. But then when Lindsay Blake had her under cross-examination, she was angry. She was getting to her a little bit. There was definitely a little bit of oppositional behavior there. So she changed. And I think that worked well for the prosecution, because you could tell she was shorter. She was answering questions faster. She was uncomfortable. So I think there was a little bit of anxiety, but there was also some anger. And I think most attorneys know, most prosecutors know, that if you get a witness angry, you're winning the war. So I think that was interesting to note. Another thing I noticed is that since you and I talked about Chad's hands, he switched his hands, the position of his hands. So today he was doing a lot of this rather than he has not been in the prayer pose as much since you brought up the hands thing on one of our shows. So I'm not saying it's us. I'm not saying it's us. I don't know. Maybe multiple people have talked about that, but that's an interesting observation I had as well.
By the way, from a witness that was closer to Chad today, I had a really good view of Chad, the jury, and the witness. I was in the center of the room. But someone that was sitting very, very close to Chad said they noticed that when he was doing this, he was kind of tapping too.
Okay.
I don't know what you think about that. But
so he's changed that. I think he's changed that up a little bit. Now I'm not saying we're the ones who did that, but we talked about it. And
Pryor's giving him hand training. He's like, look,
I think
you got to try something different.
I think Pryor's listening to you or us and getting angry every time he hears us. So I don't know. Hopefully that'll end in a good outcome for the prosecution, but we'll see. So what else about Emma? So I think the most interesting thing about Emma to me was that Pryor somehow, I guess Pryor believed what Pryor was trying to do was he was trying to normalize Chad's belief system.
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to say that, right? He was trying to say that this belief system isn't so unusual because Tammy believed it. In fact, at one point he said, in fact, Tammy was better at sensing dark spirits than Chad, right? And Emma said yes. So he tried to normalize it, but I don't think that worked very well in the sense that there's nothing normal about this belief system.
No,
so
there isn't.
The other thing that, just a quick observation on Pryor said, Pryor said, quote, so you didn't share his religious beliefs, meaning Chad's religious beliefs. And you know what Emma said? Here's Emma's response to that was, quote, not necessarily. That's a horrible response.
That is a horrible
response.
If
you're going to say you didn't share his religious beliefs, you should say, no, I didn't share them. But she's, by saying not necessarily, she's saying, yeah, I pretty much shared them. I think the prosecution should come back to that. So about just reinforcing this idea that Emma loses a lot of credibility because she has the same belief systems as her father, and Lori's a convicted murderer. And that belief system led to the current case, to the current situation. So you can't give a witness much credibility when they believe the same things that eventually led to murder.
That's
and
true.
I think Pryor thought he was being clever and normalizing it and kind of downplaying it. And, he also talked to Garth about the same thing.
Garth was like, I believe in evolution, though. That's a difference.
Right. No, Garth basically said, I believe in the exact same belief system, but with evolution. I'm like, okay, so you believe the same thing as your dad, essentially. So
right, and he believed in dark and light. Yeah.
The other thing I think that kind of cuts into Emma's credibility is she talked about being possessed by a dark entity, and that her dad had to comfort her by he gave her a blessing or somehow was able to cast out this dark entity. That's the other thing Pryor was trying to do. He was trying to normalize this idea of castings. And he talked about Joseph Smith doing castings. Joseph Smith did castings on, do you know who? You probably know the Newell Knight from the
Yes. So let me tell you about this. Yes, I'm going to read to you that part in the book. So here's a full story. Excuse me, guys. I have a cough drop. Full story that I haven't shared yet. Let me pull this book up. Let me make sure I have it. Okay. So, ready for this? Early on in the case, I reached out to LDS historian because I saw, there it is, Saints, No Unhallowed Hand. That is the book. I saw John Pryor early on in the trial with a book called Saints, No Unhallowed Hand. I looked it up. He had some sticky notes in it, and he was passing it to Chad to look something up in it. It was like Chad wanted it. And it's published by the LDS Church. It's church history. And today we learned why. because it is that book that has this story in it about Newell and a casting. So here's what it is. Joseph Smith, had never tried to rebuke the devil or heal someone before, but he knew Jesus had promised his disciples the power to do so. Acting quickly, he caught Newell by the hand. In quotes, "In the name of Jesus Christ," he said, "depart from him." So he said a prayer. And as soon as Joseph spoke, the contortion stopped. Newell slumped to the floor, exhausted but unharmed, muttering that he had seen the devil leave his body. The knights and their neighbors were astonished by what Joseph had done. Helping them carry Newell to a bed, Joseph told them that it was the first miracle performed in the church. It was done by God, he testified, and by the power of godliness. Clearly a story about evil spirits. I would say it was a casting similar to what Jesus Christ did in the Bible, in the New Testament, similar to what Jesus Christ did. But just so you know, that is from that book that I saw him passing Chad, because clearly Chad's like, get this book. Sorry, but go ahead. Thoughts about it?
So Pryor's goal, was to normalize this belief system a little bit. And so, for example, when he talked about with Emma, this idea of light and dark, that he sees this as when you're light, you're more self-focused, and when you're dark, apparently you're more other focused, or the term he used is Satan focused. So he was also trying to suggest that with Emma being possessed by this dark entity that apparently Chad cast out, that the goal was just to help people feel better. It had nothing to do with something more nefarious like murdering someone, right? So, like, in other words, it was kind of a tonic. It was like a self-help tonic of sorts, according to Pryor. But the problem with Pryor going down this road is not only did I just said that not only does it reinforce Chad's belief system, but now you're talking about possession. Right now, Emma's saying that she herself is possessed by dark entities, and there's nothing normal about that. Right. So
it was a wild moment. Yeah.
Right. So you're putting your star witness on the stand and essentially indirectly discrediting her when she's discrediting herself when she says, yeah, I've been possessed, but it's no big deal. My dad cast it out. And then Pryor kept along this line of questioning. He came back and he said, are light and dark common to your faith? And Emma said, yes, and to all of Christianity. And I'm thinking, no, not quite. Like that's a little bit.
Well, also,
it's a little bit of a stretch.
A little bit of the stretch. And did you get the point where Pryor was actually trying to minimize her strange belief? I think she took that story further than Pryor was planning when she's like, yeah. And it was right after she was saying that this was her mother's belief system too. Let's point that out. She's like, yeah, this was my mom. This was all my mom. And then she's like, anyway, then I had this dark, spirit individual enter me, and my dad had to do a casting, and my dad this and my dad that. But she also, Pryor kind of tried to downplay it and say, so it's just like sort of like this dark feeling, this dark spirit. She's like, no, let me tell you, John Pryor, right, exactly what this is. This was like an individual human being trying to get into my body, and this person got there, and this dark.
Right. Yeah, I know Pryor stepped in it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think I think in a way that, there's parts of Emma's testimony that I think that probably helped the defense, but if her credibility is at stake, then obviously it didn't. And knowing, I wish the prosecution went a little more into the fact that Emma would do anything to help her dad. I guess they kind of did that a little bit when they showed the video again. Mm-hmm. But I don't, I guess they did that to some degree, that talking to her dad every day, showing the video that, Chad, he gave her $8,000 and he put $8,000 in her bank account, which obviously she's going to be biased by so many things. But I feel like, like what we saw in the 2020 interview was someone who was much more confident about the fact that that her father was framed, and that whatever her father said, she was going to, support him, and whatever he did, she was going to support him. Right. And I don't know, the prosecution they'll probably come back to that. And I thought I thought Lindsay Blake did a good job, by the way, with Emma. I'm not probably not so much with Garth, but she was forceful with Emma. I think she undermined a good deal of her testimony. I think she did really well with that. In particular, this whole idea of not wanting to look at the autopsy results, I think that was really important. And I'm glad that the prosecution went there, because that more than anything, the fact that Emma declined to see the autopsy results, that she was unwilling to sit down with law enforcement and go over them, shows the level of denial on her part. Her unwillingness to examine the reality of this case and the reality of what her mother's body looked like when they exhumed it, and the findings from the coroner. Right? She didn't want to know any of that. She didn't want to see it. She didn't want to think about it. It shows her level of denial.
Yeah.
And if she's in such denial over that, I think, and I love the fact that they ended with this on cross, that if she's in denial over that, then she's not going to be accurate or honest about anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I appreciated that. I think that was the most powerful part of the cross-examination, was kind of pointing out, look, she doesn't want to look at this. She doesn't, and I don't mean just the autopsy, just in general. She doesn't want to look at what her dad did. She doesn't want to look at this situation realistically. And maybe she's not capable of looking at it realistically. And the perfect example of that is the fact that she can't discuss or consider the autopsy.
Well said. Well said. I'm slowing chat a bit. Sorry, I just got a request from some moderators. We have nearly 10,000 people, by the way. That might be the biggest chat we've ever had. I think we had 10,000 a year or so ago, and ever since. Thanks, you guys, for being here. Thank you. We all want to know what you're going to say. It was a wild day in court. Thank you, John, for bringing this, for reacting for us in real time. What else? And a lot of questions are coming through. We just hit 10,000 in chat. A lot of questions are coming through. I am starring them. And I did slow chat as much as I possibly can. It cannot be slowed more.
Yeah, let's keep talking about Emma. We'll talk about Garth in a second. So the other thing I thought was interesting was the part about that, trying to portray Chad as the grieving husband, right?
Yes.
I'm not sure that was super effective, by the way. I mean,
no.
I felt like it was a little forced, for sure. There was a line later where Emma said that she talked about, Pryor was asking her questions, and she said, she's talking about her father here. She said, he cried and seemed happy at moments. I'm like, I don't think the grieving husband should be, quote, happy at moments. I think you're kind of contradicting yourself there a little bit, right? And so I don't think that was especially helpful for Chad. I mean, the Garth was a little more dramatic and said that his father was, really distraught in a way that he had never seen him before. And, I don't know. I mean, it definitely, there was one objection that it was, hearsay and speculation. And I kind of agree with that. Like, it was very interpretive.
Yeah.
But the grief thing, I'm sure they're going to come back to, but to say someone's grieving a great deal and then to say they're happy at the same time, that's not particularly compelling.
Well, and what about her saying, hold on. What about her saying too, it was hard to see him that morning because I'm used to my dad being in charge and in control. It's like,
Well, he was.
I know.
He was totally in charge. I mean, right. She just reinforced. I guess she's right. I guess being being the slightest bit vulnerable makes her feel like he's not in charge a little bit. You know, I guess she's saying she's not used to seeing her dad being even remotely vulnerable or helpless, I guess, to some degree.
Or telling everyone what to do. I know. And the fact is, he probably didn't know what to do. The whole, like, what do we do? What do we do? Was probably kind of honest. He was like, I just did this. What should you like?
No,
Yeah.
I know. And also, like, when you put it in the context of what's going on, when you know what really is going on, he's thinking, well, you know, I'm going to get married soon. Like, right? Yeah. Should I go to Hawaii? Like, when he's asking that question, he's got all these other issues going through his mind. Like, how do I get away with this, basically?
Yeah.
When I heard him say, when she says, he's saying, I don't know what to, you know, what do I do? What do I do? He's thinking basically, how do I get away with it? How do I get to Hawaii? And how do I get her, you know, buried or as soon as possible? And then how do I get married to Lori? Because Lori's waiting in the wings and she's anxious, right? He's got to deal with all these fires out there. So in that sense, yeah, I read that as just that. I saw that as more pro prosecution, actually.
Yeah, me too. We're getting a lot of great questions in chat, and I want everyone to know that thank you. I'm starring some of them. John, I'm gonna let John keep going, and then we'll get to them.
What else? The law enforcement bit. I don't think that worked very well either. I think it seems to me Pryor's starting to set up a case that law enforcement is corrupt or frame Chad, I guess. That's what Emma actually said on the earlier interview, that she felt like she wasn't specific about it, but she kind of implied that law enforcement may have played a role in framing Chad. So I think Pryor's starting to set that up. You know, that apparently Ray Hermosillo was at the gym working out and he was trying to get close to, he was trying to edge over towards Emma so he could listen in on her conversation. I don't know. Seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. I'm not sure how that would have anything to do with framing them, but it seemed like Pryor's examples of corrupt law enforcement were pretty weak.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the gym incident with Ray Hermosillo, he's in a public space. Emma Daybell's in a public space with him. I mean, even if he's trying to do that, like, that doesn't have anything to do with being corrupt or trying to frame her.
Right. And people are wondering why she's complaining about Ray being close to them at the gym. I'm just saying. So.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's if the bench press is right next to where she is, the guy has to do the bench. You know, he's got to get his workout in.
Right. I have a feeling that everyone in Rexburg probably works out at the same gym too. There's probably, if there's 2 McDonald's in Rexburg that seemed to surprise Pryor, there might just be a couple of gyms, few gyms.
Yeah, that was the biggest bombshell, was the 2 McDonald's. There's 2 McDonald's.
Pryor was like, oh, Pryor was not expecting that.
Right. Pryor was shocked. He's like, what? 2 McDonald's?
He was like trying to paint this teeny tiny town where they had to like drive far to get to Rexburg. I'm like, it's not that far. And he's like, there's 2 McDonald's.
Well, speaking of McDonald's too, that was another totally ludicrous moment when he was talking about how Tammy wasn't feeling well, so he sent Garth out. He sent Garth out to get, or Emma, was it Emma or Garth?
Garth.
He sent Garth out to get some food, right? And Garth came back with a quarter pounder with cheese. Hold on.
And he made a comment.
He came back with a quarter pounder with cheese, and he said that that's my mom's favorite, and he said, oh, Pryor said, oh, that's a healthy meal. Like, he's obvious. I mean, so Pryor's going so far as to suggest that the quarter pounder with cheese killed her.
Right. You know what I'm going to eat tonight? I'm going to McDonald's and I'm getting a quarter pounder with cheese.
Yeah, make sure you get
but
the cheese.
I have a feeling I'm going to survive tonight. So
yeah,
it is
I
good.
hope so.
In my opinion, the quarter pounder is the best thing on the McDonald's menu. Well, their fries first and then the quarter pounder.
So I think when you see moments like that, that suggests to me that that he's reaching a little bit, right? Like, I mean, it's true that those types of moments can plant a little seed of doubt, and he's trying to find any moments he's kind of trying to seed this thing with doubt. But on the other hand, it's like to imply that the quarter pounder with cheese, which is her favorite meal, combined with her weight, or with her lack of, I don't know, with her being winded. I mean, his argument is, so I was actually waiting for something more compelling in terms of her health.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what we learned is that she may have sleep apnea, which is
that's just pure speculation. Pure speculation.
She was anemic. Emma told us that she would come home exhausted and like go to bed early. And I'm thinking, like, well, welcome to the real world. Like, welcome to any middle-aged couple with kids, right? Like,
who's working two full-time jobs and waking up bright and early. And she also said, but she never stops. I mean, she didn't have time to make friends at the school because even during lunch, she would have to go help the kids buy their lunches. I'm like, did this woman ever sleep? Oh, no. And also, I just want to point out, also with the anemia, Lindsay Blake pointed out that wasn't even in her medical records. Oh, great, guys. I left. I have to go. Keep talking. I've got to put you on mute, though, and grab my charger right in the back here in this closet in my portal real quick. So keep talking, but I'm going to lose you if I don't grab my charger for this.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the the health issues. So his argument is that the combination of anemia, exhaustion, possibly sleep apnea, being easily winded, right? His suggestion is that all of that somehow led to her death. And of course, he can't explain the pink foam coming out of her mouth or like the massive amount of blood around, right, that also around the crime scene. I mean, so I'm pretty sure people that are anemic aren't bleeding from their lungs. It's preposterous. I mean, I actually thought that Emma was going to say something more compelling. Right. I was actually surprised that she just said it's anemia and she's tired all the time. She's exhausted. Oh, also the carrying the books. That was another thing. Like, there's some implication that she carried this box of books and that was like the last straw. Then she had a quarter pounder with cheese. She was exhausted. She came home and she expired because the books, the weight from the books put her over the edge and collapsed her lungs, right? I mean, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense.
Everything was a contradiction. I remember when you brought up a lot of contradictions with the Shanna Gardner case from those interviews. It felt similar listening to her testify. Like, nothing made sense. Like, my mother could hardly walk, but she was always so busy at work. She had no friends, but then it was our school friends that invited us to do Zumba. Just on and on, little things like that. I mentioned that in my lunch live. But
the introvert part, that was an attempt to discredit all the people that said, I knew Tammy well, she was in great shape, we went to Zumba together, right? That was all an attempt to suggest that those friends didn't really know her. that she kept to herself, that if she did see them, she didn't tell them anything of any consequence. Right. So, but again, I mean, there were a lot of people that testified that Tammy was fit. She was happy. Right. That I don't know. So, yeah, I agree. There were a lot of contradictions.
Yeah. Tell me, can I ask about the wind change, or are there other things you want to talk about first?
Oh yeah, the Googling. Right. That was a great moment on Cross that Emma had Googled the weather the day before was it Tyler or JJ?
Tylee, because of the bonfire.
Yeah. So that was fascinating to me. So Emma had searched for southwest winds on Google the day before Tylee disappeared.
Or so she claims.
I actually took that. I thought that was a start. To me, that was actually a startling moment, because the way I read that was Lindsay Blake was indirectly implicating Emma Daybell in the murder of Tylee Ryan.
Wow.
How do you get to that? How do you get to that? Because she's looking at the weather to see if their trip to Yellowstone is going to be impacted in any way, to see if, again, this is speculation. Lindsay didn't elaborate, but I think, to me, what she was implying was she wanted to see if the weather was going to be sufficiently impactful to prevent Tylee from going to Yellowstone, maybe Tylee from being murdered and then buried in the yard, right? If it's raining or if the winds are too high, you can't start a fire. You can't, right? It's going to be harder to bury someone if there's, a driving rainstorm.
Yeah.
So I actually took that to mean that Emma was helping Chad Daybell, her father, and Alex Cox probably maybe to a lesser degree. And again, could Lindsay Blake, could the prosecution develop this and charge her? No. But I think she's putting that out there to show that there's a real credibility issue, and that Emma Daybell may very well know more than she's letting on. There'd be no reason for her to be Googling about wind speeds and wind directions and weather, right? Like, think about it. Why would you want to look at the forecast so closely the day before Tylee disappears? Not only disappears, but is presumably murdered and buried in Chad's backyard.
Wow.
So to me, that was a really incredible moment, because I felt like not only did Lindsay Blake nail that, but and again, I don't know what the jury hears or takes away from that. I don't know. Right. That's the wild card. We don't know what any of that means, but I thought that was an incredible moment, because I think it could potentially implicate Emma Daybell in Tylee's disappearance.
That's fascinating that's how you saw it. You're right, and that could be how the jury takes it too. I just thought it was shocking that she was, what I believed was possibly lying on the stand, and it seemed even more clear when, in answer to another question, is what direction were the neighbors' houses, and she said she didn't know north, south, east, west. I'm like, wait, so you don't know north, south, east, west, but you're telling me that you're the one that Googled southeast wind directions? Either someone told you to do that for them, or directions.
I took it more as I saw it more as less about directions and more about weather. That she wanted to know the weather and the weather patterns and wind directions, because she wanted to know whether they could bury the body, whether they could burn what direction the wind would be blowing, so that if there was a fire, they would know in what direction the smoke would be going, who would smell it, who would see it. They would want to know the weather at Yellowstone, whether whatever they were doing at Yellowstone, whether the weather might have an adverse impact upon their plans if the winds were extremely high, maybe they couldn't carry out their plans. I don't know. That's the way I saw it. Like the timing of that is just too it's too peculiar. It's too coincidental. She's
Wow.
Googling wind direction and weather like the day before Tylee disappears and then never again.
How do you think the jury's going to take it?
I think I don't know. I think they're going to definitely wonder about it. You know, if they see it the way I do, then obviously Emma Daybell loses any credibility whatsoever. So when I heard that and thought about it for a minute, that was exactly my thought. Not only is she less credible, but holy cow, maybe she's a co-conspirator.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
And again, I'm not suggesting that she's going to be charged. I mean, it would be you'd have to have a lot more evidence than that to bring charges. So I don't want to go too far with that. I'm clearly speculating here, but
that's how you took it. That's how it
that's how I took it, right? When I heard
that's
that,
how
I
it
thought
felt to you.
the thing that made the most sense to me was that she's doing this to help her dad.
Huh. A lot of people are saying they took it the same way. So, yeah. Wow. What about, well, keep going. You have things to say, and I know we're short on time, so keep going. And I have thank you everyone for your questions. I've started a few, but John, can you keep going with what you have written down, and then we'll talk.
So I think so the wind, the weather, looking up the weather patterns, I think that was really important. The autopsy, not wanting to know about the autopsy, I think was incredible. Right, because there's just no curiosity about her mother died. She's going to believe her father's story no matter what.
Yeah.
So maybe since we're kind of low on time here, let's talk about Garth a little bit.
Okay.
When Garth was called to the witness stand, my first thought was his demeanor, everything about Garth is like his father. Garth came across like his voice, his accent, his mannerisms, everything. I'm like, this is like Chad's mini me.
Oh. Yeah.
I mean, Garth seems like, I felt like Garth was probably more credible than Emma.
I think so.
You know, there was something about Garth that was very authentic, but on the other hand, he sort of came across, he looked like a little Chad to me. I mean, the way he talks, like you could tell that he's not the most confident guy.
Right.
Right. There's probably some self-esteem issues there. He said he was super anxious. There were a few times where he was kind of tongue-tied. I mean, I felt some empathy for him.
I did. I did too, especially when he said he was extremely close to his mother. I felt some anger towards Chad for putting him in this situation.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't shame his mother like Emma did. Emma just, in my opinion, victim shamed her mother throughout her entire testimony. Garth didn't seem to do that.
Yeah, I think Garth was definitely a little more restrained than Emma. Garth didn't have the same anger. You know, when Emma was being cross-examined, you could tell she was angry. You could tell she was a little defiant and a little oppositional. So I think Garth, in that sense, Garth had more credibility because he was more even-keeled. He had more composure. But having said that, he really didn't help the defense that much. I mean,
no, he didn't.
He gets home at 1 o'clock. He gets home at 1 a.m. the evening that Tammy dies. He says, I think Pryor kind of saw this as a slam dunk because he doesn't notice anything unusual. He doesn't hear any unusual sounds. Pryor's probably thinking that this is really helping Chad because there's nothing unusual going on. And by his account, you might infer that the cause of death would have been natural.
Mm-hmm.
Except for the fact that if you look at the pings and you look at what the coroner said, that the time of death was much earlier. And the time of death would have, it seems to me that Tammy was probably not necessarily murdered at the house. She may have been, but it would have occurred earlier. So
well, let me share some things we know from. Let me share some things we know from this trial. And also, John, I don't even think I've filled you in on the research that I've done on the stairs in the house and the cozy cone and why I think they're so important. But the night of Tammy's murder, Tammy's phone was active and playing games until 10:22 p.m. that night. And Vicky said as much. Yeah, she the last thing she was doing on her phone was Candy Crush, which also tells us she wasn't in bed with Chad because Chad didn't allow his wife to play games on her phone. That was a no-no. 10:23 to 10:55 p.m., Chad and Alex text each other. 11:28 p.m., a single image is deleted from Tammy's phone, which we don't think she deleted. 11:34 p.m. to 11:35 p.m., Chad texted Lori. Garth did not get home until 1 a.m. I think you can infer what happened before Garth got home from his job at the haunted house.
Right, exactly. So it doesn't harm the prosecution's case. When Garth said, I mean, Pryor thinks it does, but when Garth says there was nothing unusual, there were no unusual sounds, it's because Tammy was deceased well before he got home. So again, Garth could very well be telling the truth, but he's just not adding any information that's useful.
This emphasis on the stairs, I want to point out too. And John, you haven't seen every single day where stairs are brought up and just different questions. Vicky Hoban and I did a live yesterday where we just laughed about the stairs that go both up and down in the house and how John Pryor wants to make it clear that these stairs aren't a thing. And Emma Daybell called the stairs, just an attachment of a pump house, despite us having photos inside of beds inside this, and that we know that Chad was sleeping there when the search warrant for the children's bodies, when they did the search for the children's bodies and found them. And we know that there was a separate entrance to this place. So we've been speculating without you, John, about all these theories. And today Emma tells us that nobody could hear anything in the cozy cone, which is what it's called. We also have testimony from Patty and Hannah that Chad went downstairs and that Tammy stayed upstairs. And so I'm starting to think that something happened to Tammy upstairs, that somebody entered into the entrance that has nothing to do with the garage. They entered, and I have a video of Tammy opening that entrance in a home video, and that perhaps something happened to her upstairs. All of the questioning is leading to that idea. And Emma told us today that nobody could hear anything in the cozy cone. Just want to point that out. Sorry, go ahead.
So I only have a few minutes here before I have to.
We might need to ask you a couple of questions too from people that have really requested it.
So let me get to what I think are the most important points remaining. The raccoon comes up over and over and over again. And Pryor seems to think that by showing that there were raccoons running rampant around their yard, that somehow that is going to create some reasonable doubt about the now infamous text that Chad wrote to Tammy. And the problem with that is simple. And that is that what's Chad going to say to her? Oh, I've got Tylee's body here. I'm dismembering it. Like he's got to call her a raccoon, right? He's got to try to cover it. He's got to try to mask it as something else. So the most logical way to do that is to say that it's a raccoon in the text. So I think it's really irrelevant whether there's raccoons running around the yard or not. The issue is when you look at the larger picture, when you look at when Tylee went missing, when you look at how she died, when you look at where she was found, when you look at the relationship between Chad and Lori and Alex, right? When you look at the whole sum of events and how they fit together, the raccoon it's really not that critical. I mean, and it's not hard to infer that the raccoon is Tylee. So I think the jury will see past that. But I mean, I guess it's Pryor's job to question things and, to create some doubt around this raccoon and to imply that the raccoon in the text was really a raccoon. But I mean, what else is it going to be?
Right.
He's not going to tell you that he killed someone. He's not going to tell Tammy, oh yeah, we just killed Tylee, I'm burying her. Of course he's going to say it's a raccoon.
Right.
It's also significant that they didn't find any raccoons.
And it's also significant that he said limbs and not tree limbs.
Yeah. Right. But this issue of where the raccoons are buried and all that, like the places where that they initially said the raccoons were buried, they weren't there. And that discredits him a lot too. So I don't think the raccoon, I mean, the raccoon issue is a little maddening because Pryor goes on and on and on about the raccoon and how important it is. And clearly he's trying to show that Chad's really talking about a real raccoon, but he's not. He's clearly not. If you look at all the evidence, it's preposterous. He's not talking about a raccoon. And the other thing to get from on Garth, these are some quotes from Garth about Tammy's health. Quote, she tired extremely easily. Quote, she would come home and collapse. Quote, in the yard, she got winded easily. She had fainting spells. They're trying to suggest that all of that apparently was sufficient to lead to her death, right? But it's not. I think it's like a shot in the dark, right? Like he's just trying whatever he can. And to go from being winded to bleeding out of your lungs, that's a whole different scenario, right? That like it's a huge leap. He's making this incredible assumption that somehow being winded means that you're going to collapse and your lungs are going to, you're going to bleed out from your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
So that part is actually, to me, that part's a little maddening because it's such a stretch. And Pryor so far in his defense has presented no real evidence that this could have been natural causes, given what the coroner found, given the state of the body when they arrived on the scene, right? None of that is consistent with anemia or being winded or being tired or being exhausted, right? It's even sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is not going to lead to pink foam coming out of your mouth. Sleep apnea is going to be more like a heart attack in the middle of the night or something that's, not obvious.
Well, let's also talk about how you mentioned the fainting spells. First off, no one's ever said anything about actual fainting. They've only just said lightheadedness. But let's talk about how Emma Daybell said, well, Chad predicted her death percentage, but it wasn't really death percentage. She just pretty much said that when she felt lightheaded, it's because her spirit was leaving her body. That's wild too. That's not going to bode well for Emma. Yeah. I have a few questions here. Anything else? I know you have to go, but there are some questions we have to get to.
So I think I go back to my initial point for the people who came later, which is that I think when a defense leads with family members as their primary witnesses and they're making their case, their star witnesses are all family members, like the first three witnesses, Emma, Garth, and Joe. Is it Joe Murray?
Yep, Joe Murray.
Yeah, Joe Murray. That's a bit of a problem. When you mount a really solid defense, you don't want to have to bring in family members because juries understand that family members are biased. especially
Yeah.
family members that believe exactly what you believe, and those beliefs then lead to murders. That's a problem.
And they're all working out at the same gym, and they're all
Yeah,
Googling
right.
the same wind direction. And they all have they all have their own story though about who's driving what car. It's a little off. They should have maybe talked that one over a little bit more.
So yeah, so if you want to
Okay.
ask
There are
a few
so many here.
questions.
Yeah. Thank you to those who have sent super chats. Let's start with Mordecai. Will Chad's grandiosity require that he testify, especially given the lackluster defense testimony today? Your thoughts, John?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So first of all, let me talk about the lackluster testimony today. I thought for sure that Emma and Garth would be more gregarious, and that they'd have more powerful testimony. So I agree, like it was pretty lackluster, but I don't think Chad's going to see it that way. I was paying attention to Chad, the way he was responding to a lot of it, and he seemed really pleased. So I think Chad actually perceives that this testimony today is going to help him immensely, which would then lead to I think, less likelihood that he'll testify. So if Chad feels like he's in trouble, or that somehow this testimony is not landing with the jury, then he may testify. That's true. But what did you think of the jury? How were they reacting to a lot of this? What would you say?
Some of them were taking notes, not all of them. And it varied during the day who was taking notes when. There were a couple that actually just looked really disturbed. There was one in particular that kind of just looked appalled the entire day. Troublemaker Baker is saying Emma is in deep. I think she's one of the 4 100% trust level people that Chad named on the list. This is true. There is one person, and we don't know who it is. Lori gave Raphael, that's Chad. Audrey, that's Baratario. Talia, who's Talia? Is that a code name for Emma? And then Stacy. That's a solid point. Question from Lynn Jen. Dr. John, do you think that these children saw Tammy as nothing more than subservient? They do not seem to care at all. They appear to be on autopilot.
Subservient. I think they definitely knew Chad was in control of the house, and Emma pretty much said something to that effect. So I don't know about subservient. I mean,
Emma did mention that her dad was in control and the patriarch of the family.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, he certainly was the one in charge, I feel like. But what do you think?
I think they felt close to her. I think maybe they saw her being subservient to their father, but not necessarily towards them. So I think there were different relationships in the family, and the kids probably had a less of a subservient relationship with Tammy than Chad did.
Yeah. Dr. John, please elaborate on Emma saying her dad hates dogs. That was a moment. I brought that up in my lunch live. He doesn't like children. He doesn't like dogs.
Yeah, I don't think that's a moment that's going to win over the jury. So,
No.
I mean, typically,
Nor me.
Yeah, or us, right? Typically, people that dislike dogs and animals in general, they tend to lack empathy. So, I guess Chad probably sees animals as being wildly inferior to human beings, and so my guess is that's why he doesn't like dogs. He sees dogs as a nuisance and not as pets, not as members of the household that can bring people a lot of joy. So I think to me, it indicates a lack of empathy.
Yeah. Dr. John, do you think the testimony did more harm than good today?
I think it may have. I think it really depends on how much the jury scrutinizes the testimony. I think if they pick up on some of the contradictions that we're talking about here right now, I think it'll backfire quite a bit. And I think most juries are pretty astute. So I think it could very well backfire, especially those moments about not wanting to look at the autopsy during Emma's testimony, and Googling weather patterns, like all of that is potentially going to really hurt the defense.
Yeah. Cindy K is saying prosecutors need to dive into her Googling wind direction more. Why did she use her parents' computer and not her own? What specifically was her event that she was supposedly Googling it for? And I agree, Cindy, because listen to this. South-southwest winds would actually blow from Chad's to Emma's, which is kitty corner across the street. So she's Googling this at her parents' computer, and she's maybe concerned about something blowing into her yard. I mean, yeah, they do need to look into that. Let's see. I'm just looking if there's anything else. Dr. John, what do you think of Emma hiding cash? You need to go. I can answer some of these too. I can continue this live. We have 14,000 people watching. We've never had so many people on a live. Right. I'll stick around for a little bit more and answer some of these questions. But John, thank you. We'll dig deep more. Hit an hour this weekend.
All right. Thanks, guys. Good seeing you. I'm glad I could jump on for a quick afternoon analysis here.
Yes. Thank you, babe.
All right. We'll see you. Bye.
Oh, I removed you too. Let's see. All right. Let me answer some of these questions about the jury. I apologize that I am not a psychologist. The psychologist has left the building, but I was in court all day, and I will share some things that I saw and things that I felt. Anne asks, question, Lauren, was the jury taking notes? Were they paying attention? Yes, they were. They absolutely were. At the beginning, only 2 were taking notes when Emma was talking. It varied throughout the day, and different jurors were taking notes at different times during the day. There was a couple jurors in particular that, like I said, they just sort of looked appalled and really concerned or confused the whole time these children were testifying. I would say the feel in the courtroom, we cannot talk during court, but we all kind of go out on our breaks and kind of be like, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? And the consensus really was that, honestly, it was wild what Emma was saying, that she went too far, that she probably said things prior to don't want her to say, that there were a lot of tells, that people couldn't believe the contradictions she was making. People wondered about the children lying on the stand. That was sort of what was happening in the courthouse outside in the conversation. But yes, the jurors were absolutely paying attention. This is true. Megan Connor says fatigue, sleeping a lot, isolation, all signs of depression. I agree. It's also a sign of middle age, right? I mean, we know that she was taking Prozac, and we know she was depressed, which also, that's another contradiction Emma made. My mom's taking Prozac, but she doesn't go to the doctors, although Prozac is prescribed by a doctor, and that she did go to the doctor in 2019. A lot of contradictions. And yeah, that can all be a sign of depression, which we know that she was taking Prozac. It can also be a sign of getting older. And by the way, when I go out into the yard to work, I absolutely love a helping hand from a man who is physically stronger than I am. I don't think that really is important either, when Garth's like, yeah, my mother asked me to be her muscles in the yard, as you should be. Yeah, someone is pointing out that Emma is the only one that was ever possessed by an evil individual that lived to tell the tale, according to Chad Daybell's belief system. Agree. 2019 was extremely freezing. You're right. The potato crops were actually freezing early. It's always a concern in Rexburg and in the East Idaho area when the weather does change because of potato crops, and it is a concern. It was interesting that Emma said the mattress was only there for a couple of days and hardly there. She also referred to this cozy cone, which is carpeted with electricity and beds, as a pump house. Again, I have on our channel in a short that I made that clearly shows exactly what this is. In fact, let me see if I can pull it up. We should watch this together. Calling it a pump house was a stretch. Um, in my opinion, a wild stretch. And also John Pryor has shared that it had no electricity, and today Emma said it had minimal electricity, and we have seen in photos lamps and plug outlets in the cozy cone. So it's a very, very confusing thing. Um, my computer is slow. I don't know why my computer is slow and it's not going to my channel, so we'll just keep talking until um, it goes to my shorts. Um, Thank you, CC, for sharing about our limited edition merch that just launched. We're having a lot of people submit design ideas for the merch. So this is made uh, for the people, by the people, you could say, podcast people. This has been created and designed by our fabulous podcast people, all this merchandise that we are creating and sharing. Thank you for those that have sent their design ideas. A gem said in chat at the time that Emma was possessed by her dad and needed to cast out, doesn't understand her own emotions. What does Dr. J think? I wish he was here for this. That yes, she did refer to negative emotions, and the emotion code book was brought up, which was a very popular book by Bradley Nelson in the Rexburg area, even before Julie Rowe. And yes, uh, um, it and in that they talk about the body keep like sort of like how your emotions affect everything else in your body. So the fact that Emma Daybell is now saying that she was having anxiety or something, thus she thought this evil entity or individual, she actually referred to it as an individual, a person was getting into her, um, entering her. I don't think she understands her emotions, and just because you have a negative emotion doesn't mean that you are bad or dark. And I think that that was really taught in the Daybell house, that if you even Garth says that as much, saying that dark was selfish. Or was it Emma that said that? Dark, it was Emma. Being dark was selfish. Being light was being Christ-like. So it seems like if there was a negative emotion in the Daybell house, that would equate to being dark, to being evil. Even Tammy's depression is a shameful thing. Can prosecution pull jail calls between Chad and his kids? Also, how do you think the family is fitting back into the general community? Oof. I do believe that they can pull jail calls, yes. And I've heard from sources that people just don't talk to the children about the situation. So I doubt it's been easy, but it seems like elephant in the rooms are and not talking about things is a bit of the Daybell way. Thank you, Lisa. Um, Thank you so much. Lisa says, thank you again, both of you, for everything. In addition to your insights, it just feels reassuring to share the daily activity around this insane case with you. I'm so grateful that it's helped. Exactly. If you're on antidepressants, you have to see your doctor regularly. They won't renew a prescription. So Tabby did regularly see a doctor, and we know that she saw one in 2019, and that was the year she passed away, and that there was no actually record of anemia. Not that anemia would even kill you, but if that's the best they can come up with, menopause and anemia, um, she was pretty good. She was pretty good. Also, the going to bed early thing I want to point out as well. Um, if she went to bed early, we don't even know because Emma Daybell wasn't there, and she's taking her dad's word for it, like she does everything. But how early was Tammy getting up in the mornings too? She was working full time and tending to the yard and her animals, and didn't ever stop. Um, I just, you know what? When I still go to bed when I'm home at 8 p.m. with my son. It just doesn't make any sense. But we know that she was up playing Candy Crush until 10 the night before. Um, Also, I want to point out too this idea of Garth getting her McDonald's. Lindsay Blake made a point earlier last week to ask what was in Tammy Daybell's stomach, and the answer was peanuts and potatoes. And then Lindsay Blake across said, but she didn't have a Big Mac in her. And the answer was no. And then she concluded that witness. It makes me very curious how McDonald's plays into this. Garth says he brought her McDonald's. And who knows? There was no Big Mac or quarter pounder found in Tammy, but she did have inside her potatoes and peanuts. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you. A lot of the times, by the way, yes, I do have asthma. I've had it since I was a child. And sometimes I think getting anxious and I was trying to rush home. I was okay all through court. Kind of like increases the inflammation in my cough. So I apologize. The good news is I'm not going to jump to thinking I have an evil spirit in me because I'm anxious. I'm going to process why I'm anxious and know it's okay to be anxious and that it happens and explain it to all of you. But don't worry, I'm not going to jump to the fact that because I'm anxious, maybe something came through the crown of my head. And no, please, no castings needed. But I appreciate all of your cough drop funds and the eucalyptus, all the homeopathic stuff you guys are giving me. Doesn't mean I don't go to the doctor, but I appreciate it and it's helping me. Thank you. What is a pump house? A pump house, it's a great question. What it isn't is a place where people sleep, where there's beds and electricity. Let's see if I can pull this up, by the way. It's telling me that I'm offline on my YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure I'm not offline because we're going live right now. So let's see here. My shorts. Okay, we're going to bring up this short. I just want to show you guys. This is the alleged pump house. For those that haven't seen it, let's watch. And while I pull this up, just know that there was one mistake in editing. I realized that the chimney in the garage is I zoomed in a little bit too much, but the chimney in the garage is the brick. So I'm just going to explain to you how this is not above the garage. And while there is clearly an entrance from the garage because everyone talks about it, and Emma went off and off about how complicated it would be to get to the cozy cone because you have to go through a garage, I'm going to show you guys that there is an entrance from the outside that's quite simple to enter. Quite simple. Here we go. Here are my shorts.
Here is a video proving that there are stairs in Chad Daybell's house. A lot of people might think that the loft is above the garage, but it's not, as you can see here. It's really eerie and heartbreaking seeing a video of Tammy here with her kids. And if you see here, she's about to open the door of the cozy cone right here. Those are blinds over windows, not garage doors. And this is the door Tammy is opening. And as the video zooms out, you see that this is a cozy cone where they have a loft upstairs. Oh, and look at this, beds upstairs in the cozy cone. So clearly not above the garage. Oh, and actually here's the garage. That's a chimney to the left right there. Do you see that in the garage? Okay, chimney right there. And take a look at this. This is where the actual garage is. Chimney, garage. That's the front of the house away from the cozy cone. No loft above that garage. And according to Ray Hermosillo, Chad Daybell did sleep upstairs.
Mark told us that his dad, Chad, was still asleep and directed us to Chad's room. So we walked us through the house and to the stairwell of Chad's room.
Here is a video proving that there are stairs in.
Another thing I want to point out too is people are saying, asking questions about when the mattress was put up there in the bed. I want to relay that Alice Gilbert did see a bed up there. She did know of a bed up there and she saw a bed up there. We also learned from Emma Daybell's testimony again that no one could hear anything that happened in the cozy cone. They could play drums there and and musical instruments and be just fine because their mother couldn't hear. So, yeah. Did anybody catch in the 48 Hours interview that Garth said he picked his mom up from her feet, but on the stand he testified that he picked her up from the shoulders? No, I did not hear that, but I will definitely be going and looking. It was definitely been told differently. Heather Daybell tells one story about how Tammy actually slept with her feet out of the bed. That's the top side of her body fell. And then the story switched to her feet being tangled up in the sheets, which also seems very confusing because Why would feet get tangled in sheets? That just doesn't make sense. And then, of course, we know that dead people don't fall out of bed. Thank you, JK. I will work on that. I have an inhaler. It's just not with me. That's been part of the problem. How does something have limited electricity, and how would they play instruments if they don't have electricity? Yeah, no. How would they see at night? There are lamps and outlets in the cozy cone that you can see from my video. Emma was told not to watch the proceeding. Pryor said that at first the kids don't know the facts presented. You know what's fascinating about that, and I thought it was a great point too that John and I didn't go over, is Emma Daybell actually states that she didn't know that there was an affair with her dad. And that is true, because I was wondering how far she understood that this affair happened, because in her 48 hours interview, which was years after the fact, she stated that it was an emotional affair that her dad had with Lori Vallow. And then it was only after that 48 hours interview that she admitted that she now knows it was a physical affair. The point being, she talks to her dad every day. Her dad is an honest, upstanding guy who calls the shots, and everywhere, the entire world knew about the affair. The entire world knew about the affair the moment the news dropped about the missing kids, because there was a picture of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. And for her to not know about the affair shows you just how out of touch and how extreme her denial is. She finally admits that she learned from the news, not from her dad. So her dad didn't come clean about the affair. Her dad's telling her a whole other story. But she admitted that she didn't even know. That's how in denial and how ignorant, I'm going to say ignorant, she is. So ignorant. Thank you, Ozzy Tad. The cozy cone is relevant because it had stairs, it had power, it had a bed. Pryor's trying to deny the stairs existed. Why does this matter? Why does this matter so much? I am starting to rearrange my entire theory, and I'm starting to believe that something happened to Tammy in the cozy cone. Chad Daybell was downstairs. And then I wonder, this is just me wondering in my brain, always shifting. I just process with my audience here. You guys send your ideas if you disagree or agree, or if something else is better. Garth did hear a thud. I believe him. He's told this story on 48 Hours, and he's told it today, which it took him a while to tell it today. He skipped that, by the way. He said he went to his mother's room, the first part of his testimony, because his dad said, Garth, come help me. Today, it took him a while to get there. It was only by extra questioning during the cross that he's like, well, I heard a thump first. In his 48 Hours interview, he says, well, he heard a thump. And then he went to go see what was up. He didn't mention his dad yelling for him. In the 911 call, he says that my dad and I found my mom. His story has changed a lot. Slightly, but a lot. And so why is the cozy cone so important? I'm starting to believe that maybe Chad moved Tammy before anyone was awake. Maybe he was even waiting for Garth to go to bed. Garth admitted he was watching YouTube for a few hours. That would be difficult for Chad. He could probably hear him. Garth said he could hear his dad snoring. Never heard his mom. What if Chad was attempting to move Tammy down to the bed, and that was the thud that Garth heard? That's just one idea. I don't know. I do not know, but I'm starting to believe now that Tammy may have lost her life in the cozy cone. And so for Emma to deny that there's a solid entrance and it's complicated would make that confusing. How would Tammy's body get down? That's true. You know, he would have to go out the entrance. I mean, maybe they're definitely trying to create doubt there. But I think it's pretty easy for someone to get into the cozy cone. Who knows? Let me know your thoughts. All I know is Chad and Tammy, I'm fairly confident, were sleeping separately, and that was said as much in court today too when Lindsay Blake cross-examined Garth Daybell. She said, you told others that you saw your dad but not your mom sleeping with him. And then he implied that he saw his mom on the couch. None of these stories match. And those slight variances, when it comes to the day somebody died, they matter. And if your story does switch, make it very clear why. Let's figure out why. I agree, 7 Sweet Kids. I agree. I know he tried to make that clear too, that he picked her up because he thought she needed help at that moment. All I know is Chad and Garth moved a body before they called 911. That's problematic. They moved her body and then came up with a she fell out of the bed story. Dead people don't roll out of the bed. And they can't even get that straight. In one moment, her feet are tangled, which to me sounds like, why would her feet even be tangled in the bed? That sounds like there was a struggle. So that's not a good story. Couldn't mute it in time. And then another story told to Heather Daybell is that because Tammy slept with her feet out of the bed, her head fell. Oh no, excuse me, her feet fell, but her top of her body stayed in bed. And then on the Avow website, which I wish they had brought this into evidence. I wish so much that they had brought this back into evidence. The Avow story is that Chad Daybell woke peacefully in the morning to his wife laying right next to him with a smile on her face, looking serene, like she had just simply passed in the middle of the night. No sleeping separately, no red foam, no falling out of bed. Just her spirit left her body peacefully. I mean, there are so many contradictions to this story, and I hope that the jury picks up on that. Some of these stories haven't been presented to the jury, like that Avow story I just shared you. They didn't see that. But they haven't seen the 48 hours interview either. But they heard the 911 call. They heard Heather Daybell testify about a pulmonary embolism. That's weird. Let's see what else. Agree, Ginny Probs. Let's talk about that too. That's important. So Joseph Murray describes, as does Emma Daybell, describe how they were fundraising for OUR, Operation Underground Railroad. That is Tim Ballard's organization. We won't get into that right now, but people that know, I've been covering Tim Ballard along with Dr. John and Operation Underground Railroad and the deep concerns we have about it. And there is a criminal investigation into Tim Ballard. So it was interesting to see as well that Joe was the head of that foundation raising money, but yet they weren't too concerned about the missing children, but they were about these alleged trafficked children. Yes. And Emma also explained that her dad wanted her to help raise money for that. Agree, Lisa. I would never. I am heartbroken for Tammy after Emma Daybell's testimony. It reminded me of a video on a YouTube channel called True Crime Underground of a woman also who speaks at the similar conferences, the Firm Expo and others. And she chastised her mother. It was a secret recording that her mother made that got leaked, but shaming her mother for eating sugar, shaming her mother for her health, shaming her mother, a very religious family. I would consider them like a fundamental religious family. And I would recommend this. Let me see if there's anyone in chat that can share the link to this. It was very, very familiar to me. And I texted somebody during the trial and I said, this reminds me of the Stoddard reporting. They're part of the Joseph Smith Foundation, and they agreed. It was heartbreaking for Tammy. I would be very curious, Emma's communication with Lori. Yes. Very, very interested if she's still talking to her or what. Emma was not afraid to blame her mother for anything and everything and just not look at any evidence. And I'm also, again, very surprised that sorry, I got distracted by Ashley's comment. Emma says that the reason Chad was so upset is because watching Tammy die was traumatic. Thank you. I wish so much we could have had Dr. John for that. That was something he needed to cover. But that was something I mentioned in my Lunch Live, that Chad was traumatized because it was actually, the word was saw Tammy die. In fact, I'll pull up the exact quote. I have it. One second. I quoted the exact thing. It was a moment. And by the way, everybody caught this. I wondered if I was the only one that caught this moment. But right when we left the courtroom, everybody brought it up. That's a good sign. That means the jury heard it too. If everybody catches it, the jury caught it. I think I was really shocked by the Fitbit thing too. By the way, with Fitbits, can you do that? Can you like shake? And that works. I thought that was a fascinating cross from Lindsay when she implied that that was told from Chad to Emma. That was an excellent cross, because even though Emma denied it, it's definitely going to lead to suspicion with the jurors, because you know that like the prosecution isn't lying. Let's see. Hold on. I want to get the exact quote because it was. I do believe there was something about that, seeing her die, or, maybe he said in vision or whatever, but it was okay. One thing. I'm going to find it. Now that I've gone this far. Okay, I give up. But it was traumatic because it was traumatic for her dad to see her mother, because he saw her mother die. Thank you, CC, for posting the link. I would love to ask John further questions just about the children in general. He mentioned their denial. John mentioned the denial. He mentioned the ignorance. He mentioned the avoidance of facts. But I would like to now dig deeper into John's theory as to why. How does it become like this? I understand children supporting their parents to an extent. It was, I think, worse today than any of us ever thought, ever. Let's see what else there is. Qualify, Lauren, how do children and Chad look at each other? They did look, so Emma did the side-eye thing too. Chad was doing it a lot. Chad looked flustered today, especially during cross. He looked proud during the first part of Emma's testimony. Probably not even realizing the things that Emma was saying were not good for him, that Emma was saying. And then during cross, Chad looked really flustered, like he was not happy that during the cross. And I think it was because he was feeling a lack of control. He was probably anxious. He's probably feeling a lack of control because he's used to being in control. And he talks to Emma every day, and he can't control the narrative, So they would look at each other, and but not always. And then Emma did break down watching the video of her and her dad, and referring to a mattress. Not broke down. She started crying. I'm sure it was hard to remember that. I mean, her emotions were real, I believe. And they would glance at one another, and the jury would look straight at Emma, and You could hear a pin drop. This was a very crowded courtroom today. I mean, every seat was taken, and they kept requesting us to squish to fit one more person. So, it was telling. And she looked at him when she came in. Ian, thank you so much. I appreciate that. In quotes, I know he valued her as a person, and seeing her die was very traumatic. Emma Daybell. Thank you. Thank you. That's a tell, in my opinion. As Dr. John teaches us, words are important. I know he valued her as a person, and seeing her die was very traumatic. He saw her die. Regarding her dad's emotions the morning of Tammy's death. Saw her mom die. Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Troublemaker. Yes. Thank you, mods, for everything. Thank you. Thank you. There's a part of me that wonders if Dr. John can maybe jump back on. He had to be somewhere. He had to pick someone up, but I'm wondering. I believe the trauma seeing her die equals Chad wanted her dead and saw, but she could not control the foam. And then he was saying, what do I do? What do I do? Emma was a part of this all along with her husband. That's a solid theory right there. Do we know where Alex was? He could have entered the cozy cone. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that's possible. Alex's phone pinged in a church parking lot nearby, the one where Chad would work. And did somebody leave that cozy cone door open? I don't know. Emma said she was trying to be an amateur meteorologist. Was she potentially lying to cover for her dad? Very likely. Very likely. Thank you, Kathleen. I'm just looking for any other questions now. I would also recommend my lunch live right after. Let's talk about Garth really quickly. Garth's testimony was frustrating to me, but also, he even said he was extremely close to his mother. I do believe that. He wasn't as shaming, although it was frustrating to hear him repeat the same story about the Fitbit and things that just didn't happen. But it's clear. I agree that the defense didn't do as good a job with Garth as they did with Emma. But I do think that there's a lot more to the story of Garth. And we saw that, and I've suspected that. I've shared that I felt he found her. I've shared that I felt the story's changed. We know that he helped move a body, even though he explains it's because he thought his mother was alive and needed help. Seems odd. But we heard as much. I think one of the most important things is we heard as much during this trial on cross. I think it was enough to maybe give the jury some doubt to his story that he testified twice at the grand jury, including his mother-in-law was also on the grand jury witness list. I want to point out. And they claimed that he told other people he saw his dad alone in the bed, that they weren't sleeping together, and that he saw his mom on the couch. There's more to the story, and I'm really interested to hear more. Can you shake a Fitbit and play Candy Crush at the same time? Great question. And does that also mean that Tammy was sleeping alone without Chad because she would never do either of those things with him in the room? Can you even shake a Fitbit and have that do a thing? According to Lindsay Blake, it sounds like this was Chad's idea that he did it. What about the mattress that Chad told Emma to move in the middle of all the money talk on June 9th? Why the mattress talk? Exactly. Why did Chad care about that? Of all the things, that was one of his biggest concerns. Move the mattress from upstairs. Why? I mean, let's give them all the benefit of the doubt. Why was Chad of all things worried about her moving the mattress? I understand, the $9,000 in 2 envelopes left in Mark's room, but why does the mattress matter? Why was he to get rid of it? Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you. Garth said he helped his mom up by the shoulders because her legs were in the sheets. I wish they had asked what Chad was doing. Right. What was Chad doing? Garth, I need your help. Why did he need Garth's help? Did he really need Garth's help? I don't know. The whole story is odd. And then again, calling 911 and saying, we found my mom on the ground frozen, is not catching her midair, and grabbing her shoulders because he thought she needed help. He said on the 911 call, my dad and I found my mom on the ground frozen. That's a very different story than he told on the witness stand today. And that is from him on the 911 call. But then he hesitated, said, I don't know. And Chad grabbed the phone because Chad's in charge and he's in control. Emma Daybell and her beliefs, they're really extreme. They're really bizarre. And I also want to point out that she was also the narrator to several of Julie Rowe's books. And when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints came out and said that Julie Rowe's books were concerning online, Emma Daybell testified online. Emma Daybell wrote something that said, this isn't true, that Julie Rowe is very faith affirming. Eric Smith, who is no longer a friend of Julie Rowe's, they have had a falling out. But when he was in with Julie Rowe, he was very close to Emma Daybell. On my interview with Eric Smith, he wept about Emma Daybell and what a great woman she is. And he hopes that she's okay because of this tragedy. Emma was very invested in these beliefs, enough so that she felt a human individual was entering her, a dark spirit, and she needed a casting. I wish they would have asked her about portals. They asked her about zombies. She claims she doesn't know them because she probably should go read some of her dad's old avow posts explaining zombies well before Lori came into the picture. Well before. But I wish they had maybe asked her about portals and what she'd say about those. It's interesting. It's a wild day. Tomorrow we start with Joe Murray. Joe Murray tomorrow. Not start. He already started his testimony. This is Emma Daybell's husband. He's been an interesting character in all of this. Sort of trolling the news stations, covering his deceased mother-in-law and the children, mocking reporters about the 2 missing children. It's interesting to see him on the stand and what he has to say. All right, everyone. Oh, thank you. We have a test. Just shook my Fitbit on my wrist. No change to step count. Shook my leg sitting down. No change. Right. I agree. Watch her die, not find her dead. That word is really, really important. I don't think that's a slip up. Possibly, Barb. That's a question for John. The Daybell family appears to have limited verbal skills and use of language. Is it possible due to arrested emotional educational development? That is a question for Dr. John. I'm not even going to attempt it, but I certainly notice, Emma Daybell's voice is unique. Thank you, Sherry. All right, everyone. I'm going to take off. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I'm going to go relax, take some allergy meds and asthma. Exactly, Sam. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm going to go do because I'm going to have to wake up bright and early just to get into court. It is 100 people at least were turned away today. And I'm so grateful that I was able to be there. And it's going to be a bright and early morning to try to get in tomorrow. So I'm going to go take care of myself. And thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll get Dr. John back. He had limited time today. He jumped on, but plan on hidden hour this weekend. And if there's something big that happens tomorrow, we'll also work to get him on perhaps directly right after court because that is the best time for us. Thank you to everyone who subscribes. I cannot believe that we had 14,000 people in the chat today. This is by far our largest chat ever. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for your support, and keep following me along as I attend every day of the Chad Daybell trial and doing my lunch lives. And thank you so much for if this resonates with you and you appreciate our work. Thank you for subscribing and liking this video. Oh, and definitely check out the merchandise that CC has been sharing. It was created by you, and more is coming. I got another merch idea as well today, so we'll keep them coming. Thanks, you guys. We'll see ya. Bye-bye.